welcome to Everyday Simple Somatics, a podcast dedicated to helping you find healing through your body's natural wisdom. I'm Dr. Christine Baker, and I'll be your host. If you are someone who has experienced trauma, you are most likely someone who has also experienced a pattern of nightmares. This is a very common symptom for trauma survivors or those dealing with chronic stress. And today's podcast is going to tell you why that is, what's actually happening in your body that produces the nightmares, and how you can help settle that experience so that you can go back to sleep. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Dr. Christine Baker. I've been a trauma therapist for over 13 years. I am also a somatic experiencing practitioner, which just means that I'm a person that believes strongly that trauma is not just something we experience, but it is the imprint left on our body, specifically our nervous system, after that experience, which is why I believe that the body has to be an integral part of trauma recovery, hence the creation of this podcast. I wanted to make that reality very simple and practical and clear. And so every single week we release a new podcast that supports a specific mental health or relational issue with a specific somatic practice so that you can really begin the rhythm of bringing your body along in your mental health journey. If you are new to nervous system work or somatic work, I'd love to invite you to check out the first 10 episodes of this podcast. They are called The Essential Foundations, and they are kind of like the basics of the nervous system. I go through some vocabulary that would be helpful for you to know. It's a great place to start before you jump into these weekly drops. If this sounds interesting to you, I'd love to invite you to like or subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you are currently watching or listening. All those little clicks really do help other people find these resources as well, so I very much appreciate it. So Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's research teaches us that trauma often resurfaces in sleep because our cognitive defenses are down at that time. So we, during the day are often able to think our way or logic our way out of trauma flashbacks or imagery, but when we're sleeping, we don't have that ability as easily accessible, right? And so during a nightmare or a flashback during the day, our body responds, and I think this is really important, y'all, so hear this. Our body responds as if the threat is happening right now. So all of the fight, flight, and freeze responses that we've talked about in previous episodes, those symptoms are going to show up if you experience a nightmare or a flashback. So things like racing heart, sweating, muscle tension, maybe twitching in your arms or legs. And for those of you that have experienced a pattern of nightmares, this probably sounds pretty familiar. And when you are in a place of fight or flight, the prospect of going back to sleep feels pretty impossible, right? Because your body is actually amping itself up to a more intense action, like fighting someone off or running away. And so the idea of like calming back down to go to sleep feels like an opposite goal. And so what happens if we have a pattern of these nightmares during the night, and I'll talk about flashbacks during the day in just a second. If we have a pattern of that, then our nervous system kind of gets caught in this loop of replaying these past experiences instead of recognizing present safety. So now when I am getting ready for bed and brushing my teeth and taking out my contacts and all the things, my brain is starting to amp itself up, because if I'm having the same nightmare every night, then my body is preparing to fight off or run away from that nightmare instead of preparing to settle down into restful, restorative sleep. So what we need to do when we're thinking about how do we nurture our nervous system if we are stuck in a pattern of nightmares is we need to find a way to reconnect to the present and to reconnect to safety, both before we go to sleep and after we have a nightmare if we end up having one that night. Everything I just said is true for people that are experiencing flashbacks during the day as well. So let's say, for instance, that you always experience the same flashback around lunchtime because something really scary happened at lunchtime. Well, your body's going to do the same thing. It's going to start to prep for intensity and fight and flight leading up to lunchtime. And so the same exact thing needs to happen. Once we figure out what that trigger is that causes those flashbacks to happen, then then that's where we need to start inserting connection to the present and connection to safety. So today's practice is going to be this combination of sensory input, because sensory input is really what connects us to the present, rhythmic movement, because that is a connection to safety. Our body knows what to expect because there's a rhythm to it, right? And orienting, because we want to really visually take in where we are, what is safe, and when we are, right? So I'm going to explain what this exercise will look like so that you can decide if it's something that you'd like to try with me. And then hopefully this can be something that supports you if you do end up having a nightmare, to help you go back to sleep. So the first bit of sensory input that we're going to do is we're going to insert a temperature change. So I'd love to invite you to keep either an ice pack or a damp cloth next to your bed, or maybe in your office drawer or something like that if things are happening during the day, so that you can kind of offer your body a temperature change to help interrupt that trauma loop. So for instance, like I have my cold water here, right? And so if this was an ice pack, say, I may, if I woke up from a nightmare, I may put it on the back of my neck, because I can really feel that. Like I am super aware of that cold water bottle on my neck, or I may put it on my cheek or on my forehead. And so that can be something right when you wake up from the nightmare, you take that cold item and you just place it maybe on your neck or on your cheek or on the inside of your wrist, like places where you're gonna really feel that cool temperature, and that can kind of help interrupt that trauma loop and really get you more into present awareness, okay? So that's the first thing, is we're going to introduce a temperature change. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to introduce some kind of rhythmic movement, okay? So I think the easiest one to do if you're waking up from a nightmare and you're in bed is some gentle rocking or swaying. So I think a great way that I love to do this is like one hand on the heart, one hand on the stomach, and then just kind of sway back and forth. And kind of keep the same rhythm so that your body can kind of know what to expect. So ice pack, swaying, rhythmic movement. And as you're doing that, I want to invite you to start to look around your space and just name 5 things that you can see in your current space. Now, I know that might be difficult if you're waking up and it's dark in your room, so you may have to turn on a light or something like this, but it can be anything, because it doesn't really matter, because what you're doing is you're just showing your body that you're in the present. You're in this moment, not the moment you just had the nightmare about, right? So I may say, I can see the lamp, I can see the light and shadow from the lamp, I can see my mirror, I can see the door. I think noticing exits is actually probably a pretty helpful thing for your nervous system. And I can notice the plugs over there and the cords with the plugs. So whatever they are, doesn't matter what they are, you're just going to look around and name them. And then I want you to see if there's any way that you can really even maybe say out loud the date, time, and location of where you are. So maybe you have a clock next to your bedside table, or maybe even your phone. So you could look at your phone and say, it is 11:47. It is February 10th, and I am sitting in my office. Say it out loud so that your body can take in, we are here and now, not there and then. So those are going to be like your steps. Pretty simple. And if you need to, you can always like jot this down on a note, put it by your bedside table, because I know it is kind of hard to access memory when you're really triggered and you've just woken up from something really scary. So it's going to be temperature change. So I would recommend cold. It's going to be swaying. It's going to be orienting, and then verbalizing the date, time, and location. For daytime flashbacks, I would say follow the same sequence. You're just going to maybe shift how you would do it. Like you could probably do more walking or standing movements. I think the orienting, it would be great if you could get outside. Love it if you could put your feet in the grass, kind of orient to some of the things that you can visually see far away, close by, all of that. And you may even use some other kind of sensory input, like you may smell a candle, you may taste a mint or something like this, things that you may have access to easier if it's during the day and you're awake and all of that. So what I'm kind of saying is these 4 steps, I really just want to do an easy button so that when you wake up in the middle of the night, this is like our smoothest transition back to the present, so that you can know I'm safe, I'm here, and it's okay for me to go back to sleep now. Okay? So let's practice this sequence together if that feels okay for you. And so you may have to pause the podcast and go get something cold, and then we will kind of work through it together. Okay? Okay. So if it feels good, maybe get your feet on the ground, feel your seat under your chair. And I want you to think about the last time. I don't want you to think about any nightmare content, okay? No nightmare content. But I want you to think about the last time you jolted yourself awake and just what that feeling is like, kind of that waking up very quickly and shockingly, maybe if you want to say that. So just think about that for a moment. Yeah, I feel it like in my chest, like quick inhale of breath. That moving forward sensation. So I want you to notice that. And then whenever you're ready, I'd love to invite you to get your cold object, and you can place it wherever feels right. Like I said, you could do inside of the wrist. And just notice what that feels like. You could do back of your neck, your forehead. And if it feels okay, maybe switch positions somewhere else. I feel very embodied right now, very present to sensation, to temperature differences. Maybe change positions one more time. And then if you want to hold that cold object in that spot, you totally can. I'm going to place mine down because I'm going to go ahead and start my swaying. Hand on the heart, hand on the stomach, supporting your core. And then whenever you're ready, kind of add some swaying. Notice how your weight kind of transfers from one side to the next. Elbows are hitting the side of my chair as I sway back and forth, so I'm also noticing that. There's something like so cozy about this. It actually reminds me of like rocking my kids at night, which feels very resourcing. And so if a resourcing memory comes up, stay with that. And then as you continue to sway or rock, I'd love to invite you to just kind of begin to look around your space and just name out loud 5 things you can see. And as you name them, I want you to really feel the vibration of what it's like to speak, where the voice comes from, where you kind of experience it coming from. I experience mine coming from like the chest right now. So I can see my plant, see my doorknob, shininess of my picture frame, my kids' smiling faces, and then my lunch pail. And just take a second to notice what that's like, to visually take in your surroundings. And then if you're ready, I'd love to invite you to just state the date, time, and location of where you are right now. So it is February 10th. It's 11:53 a.m. and I am in my office on a somewhat cloudy day. And just notice what that's like. I notice a lot of warmth. I'm really aware of my seat and my chair right now. So just see what comes up for you. And if you need to repeat this sequence, I'd love to invite you to do that. This is a great little kind of sensory reset if you are waking up in a bit of a panic or kind of a dissociative place after a nightmare or a flashback. And I say this all the time, y'all, but the key is to practice these tools before you need them. Right? So if you can even maybe do this whole sequence before you lay down to go to sleep so that you are really kind of setting your body up for I am here and I am now. And so that when you do wake up and you're in that tizzy, there's some muscle memory here where you can really just kind of smoothly move into your sequence of activities instead of it being the first time you've ever tried it, right? Also, obviously, you want to have the resources that you need close by. So the ice pack ready. You want to have something that tells you the date and time close by. Even if you just write the date on a piece of paper next to your bed, whatever it is, you just want to know that you have your resources available if they're needed, because that's also going to help your nervous system settle as you're kind of prepared for what may come up. Okay, that is actually all I have for today. So I'd love to take a second and tell you a little bit about our podcast for next week. So we are actually going to talk next week about having a strong fight response. So if you are someone who finds yourself consistently getting into arguments, raising your voice, and going from 0 to 100 in 0.5 seconds, this is going to be the podcast for you. So I want to offer you some ways that you can start to learn from the wisdom of your fight response and at the same time not let it run you and run your life. So that'll be next week's podcast. If this podcast has been helpful to you or you think next week's will be, I'd love to invite you to like and subscribe on whatever platform you are currently watching or listening. And if you'd like to learn more, we also have this great community called the Somatic Wellness Collective. This is a group of people who are passionate about caring for their nervous system. If you're interested to learn more about that, I'd also love to point you to the show notes because I've got lots more information about it there. And to close, I just want to remind you, your body has innate wisdom. We just need to learn how to listen to it, and that's what I'm here for. I'll see you next time.